I wanted to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for the role that you've played in my life. I'm so fortunate and filled with gratitude for the support that has come from each of you during times of turbulence, but also times of joy. I could not be more thankful. So I wanted to reach out and say that. We certainly have had to wrap our arms around a new way to celebrate, a new way to commune. It's been a learning curve for many, a struggle for many, in some ways a struggle for me. I certainly love a crowd and love to host a crowd and love a big party. But due to the pandemic, we've all had to rethink what that looks like. Who is in our pod? How are we close when we can't be? I put a lot of thanks out to the technical world. We have been able to connect through a computer screen or through an app that allows us to be face to face. And there's such importance in seeing the expression on someone's face when you say something, or being able to express when you're hearing something. So the fact that we have this visual connection has really taken that distance away in some respects. When we shuttered the first time, I was not as challenged. It was the beginning of spring. So I put all of that energy and all of that fear into the earth. I spent hours and hours and hours a day in my garden. And my gardens sustained me. They brought me all of the joy that I would find in a room full of people at happy hour. I poured really endless time into the earth. And it brought back tenfold. Being that there was no travel, I was able to cultivate a garden that sang its praises back to me over and over again. It was what sustained me. As we are approaching the second lockdown, I have trepidation. I equally have fear. Not the amount of fear that we had the first time around, because I think the fear of the unknown is always much stronger and more intense than knowing. We have a better understanding of what COVID is, so clearly it's not as an intense fear, but a fear nonetheless. So as we're approaching this second wave of lockdown, I've readied myself by getting my studio in tip-top shape, because I will certainly need somewhere to put that energy that I would put in a social setting. I need that busying of my mind. It's difficult for me to be in the season that's dark at 4:30 and cold and gray. So hopefully my studio brings me the same respite that my garden did. I'm kind of banking on that and hoping that's the case. One thing is for sure is I will be producing work. Where it goes, one doesn't know, but nonetheless, it does create an inventory. So there's something good about that. I did spend a lot of time reflecting, though, during the beginning months of the pandemic and figuring out what were the lessons. For me, the lessons were that via technology, I felt no distance. I talked to my friend Stan, who I talk to every day, but before the pandemic, I never talked to Stan on a video call. It was always just an audio call. And then the pandemic arrives, and then all of a sudden the norm became that, we video call. And I talk to more people than not on video now, which I think was such an immediate adjustment for us as a society. A technology that had been, living for years before, but all of a sudden it's the norm. The same thing with the Zoom. Was able to create these weekly happy hours and see, a number of people that I would normally be elbow to elbow with in a bar on a screen. Every Friday I hosted these Zoom happy hours, which truly I look forward to that like I would look forward to happy hour. So some of the lessons for me one major lesson for me was that I came to a contented place about the prospect of living abroad. When I was in college and had that opportunity, I was very fearful to do so. And the fear was born out of the fact that I would not be with family and friends, that those people would be far. I don't feel that today because of technology and, years of life and wisdom and all that comes with age. But I think that I could live very far away and feel very close in doing so. So I think that was a lesson. I also think a lesson for me is that I truly don't require a lot. And I was never really someone who required a lot. Like, that's not how I'm built. But during the kind of shutdown and the lack of consumerism, you realize that you truly need less. And there was something very fulfilling about that realization. There is a beauty in the forced slowdown, the forced consumption, or lack thereof. Those things worked for me. I felt very at ease. I also spent a great deal of time during the pandemic writing. And writing is not something that comes easy for me, but I kept pushing myself forward and pushing myself into journaling and, documenting stories and thinking about stories. And, part of the reason that was coming up for me is for a number of years I've wanted to podcast, and I have repeatedly gotten in my own way, just repeatedly. So I had received all the equipment to start podcasting from Ari, and literally was paralyzed with it. It sat on my desk, a microphone and different apps to look at, and Ari had created like a whole kind of handbook of things for me to consider. And every time I thought I was going to sit down and talk, something happened, or I did something else, or I took myself somewhere else, or I took on a different project, and I kept being my own roadblock. So during the pandemic, I really took some time to okay, let's sequence some of this. Like, what do I want to talk about? How should this sound? Like, what do I have to say? And Ari came and visited in July and said to me, let's just record. So with a nudge from Ari, I sat down to it, and it just started to feel normal. It just was talking to people, then recording talking to people, and then all of a sudden these hours start to collect. And before I know it, there I am with audio footage, and lots of it. So I reached out and I started the process of having some of these conversations edited into what would feel like an episode. It's been a very interesting thing for me to experience, that the what I have to say is not as important as that I have people to say it to and with. I am grateful beyond measure because of the people that have touched my life. I could not have ever gotten to the place I'm at without all of you and all that you have done to help me through sorrow and sadness and heartbreak and loss, but also stood on the sidelines and applauded at the smallest things or the greatest things. So my holiday card to you all is that this holiday season, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, with gratitude in my heart. I could never have done it without you. And as we approach the end of a very turbulent year, what is over the horizon is brand spanking new, glistening, exciting, exhilarating. We are such a resilient species. We are resilient. We have internal strength. We have strength in family and strength in friends and strength in colleagues and strength in whatever brings us guidance spiritually. wherever you find your strength, tap into it. Tap into it, because on the other side of this experience, on the other side of this pandemic, we will reflect back and we will find a silver lining. We will find a cup half full and maybe spilling over the top, because through that lens, only greatness follows. I wish you all the best this holiday season and the year ahead.